The pre-sale market is setting records now too. Hello, welcome back to the Vancouver Life Real Estate Podcast and YouTube channel. Today, we are talking about the pre-sale market because just like the resale market, we are seeing records being set. Understandably, the pre-sale market kind of follows what the resale market does. When resale gets super hot, pre-sale naturally follows. It's essentially a lagging indicator.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I totally, yeah, no, I totally agree. And we're seeing that right now. I mean, the last sort of time we started seeing kind of numbers that we're seeing was it around 3 years ago, so it's almost as if pre-sales have done their own little cycle here, and they're kind of coming back into, well, they're not just kind of coming back, they're back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's impressive. I mean, in March 2021, I saw 12 projects be released, or 1,434 units, right? And 75% of those are concrete condos, right? So, your time frame to build those kind of anywhere between 2.5 to 4 years, right?
That's it. So, the projects that came out last month included one by Bosa called Central Park House. Over in Metrotown, there was Concord Pacific building called Concord Metrotown. And then Belvedere is kind of the most notable. This was a high rise with 227 units in it, built by Square 9 Developments. And this is in Surrey. It's sold out in 5 days.
Oh, we've heard of those stories before. It's been a while since I've heard that, but
yeah, I mean, for context, Ryan and I kind of lived through that 2016, 2017 heyday when you would literally show up at the realtor preview of a presentation center on day one, and it would just be standing room only, elbows to elbows, hundreds of realtors in the presentation center.
I'll never forget, actually, just one anecdotal story about it, which was quite hilarious. I was lined up kind of like everybody else. I got there super early, and we all had these times to kind of go in, and the lineup, no joke, was down the street, around the block, and into the parkade, right? Like, it's ridiculous. And for whatever reason, I got called just before the guy who was in front of me. And so I went around him, and as soon as I tried to go around him, no joke, he thought I was budging in the line, and he tried to elbow me in the face. And, it was like that kind of attitude towards pre-sales, right? I think it's not quite, like that, but at the same time, we're starting to see these interest levels rise, and we're starting to see lineups, we're starting to see sellouts, we're starting to see a lot of activity. Right.
That's
hopefully
just it.
Hopefully no more fistfights.
Well, you got to think, I mean, the era that Ryan's referring to, that was a time when, you'd have a building that would come out and it would have, let's say, 250 units, and you would have 800 people lined up outside.
Yep.
So people were literally fighting to get into these units because there was, far more demand than supply.
Dan, do you remember that one? I think it was somewhere in Surrey, and there were people who were actually being paid to wait in line. Mm-hmm. And right before their time slot to go in, the realtor or whoever was paying that person would show up. That person would jump out of line, they'd go back in, and they'd take in their party with them. Yep. And, some crazy stories like that. I don't know if we're going to see that again, but it's starting to heat up like that.
It is. And yeah, and Ryan's mentioning that because people had to literally sleep overnight outside the presentation center to have a chance at buying a home. That's how wild it was back then.
Crazy.
So, fast forward to today, we are seeing in the resale market, these these record setting numbers every month, right? The last 4 months have just been, obviously on a tear. And it just kind of goes to show when you have these record low or near record low inventory levels, interests are going to open up, right? So now all of a sudden pre-sale market becomes interesting, both to end users and of course to investors. right? When you've essentially got an environment where it feels like you can't lose in real estate, which is dangerous. You can, but it feels like you can't. So people are feeling more confident than ever. And of course, opening up their wallets to the pre-sale market as well.
I think there's a couple things why, and I'd like to just maybe generally discuss why I think pre-sales are a good idea and why I think people are buying them right now. I think if you look at maybe the next sort of 5 years, right? The one thing that pre-sales do kind of have going for them is there's some stability if you actually get one, right? Once you've made your purchase, you do have a deposit structure to follow. But if it's 2.5 or 4 years out before you actually see the product, then you can ride low markets, you can assign in high markets, you can do lots of things with your pre-sale without having to be tied up in a mortgage. And I think for investors, that's a pretty favorable
Enticing.
Position. Yeah, sure, exactly. Position to be in, right? The other thing that I like about them is obviously it's a new product too, right? And a lot of Vancouver's market and the surrounding neighborhoods are older stock, right? So revitalizing it with some new stock as well. I think a lot of investors and a lot of people like that idea, right? So it to me it when you look at the fact that there's inventory is climbing in the resale market, but not a lot of it is really good stock, right? So a lot of those people are moving over to the pre-sale options because they also don't need to tie up in a mortgage, but also banks right now are offering the rates and a rate hold for 4 years, like BMO, right? You can lock in a rate today. They'll give you a rate, and if it's lower, you can take the lower rate. But if it goes higher, you get your rate that you signed at today, right? And that's an attractive feature.
That's hugely attractive, and thanks for bringing that up because it's so important. And these are these long-term rate holds that were not available back in 2016, 2017. These
would actually be in fistfights if they were.
Highly likely. So sure, if you're in this incredibly low rate environment and you're like, well, I can lock this in for 3 to 4 years for until this project completes, of course that's enticing to somebody. So that's why I think we're going to start to see an accentuated interest in this pre-sale market. To kind of touch again here on just last month with these 12 projects that were released, the total units was 1,434 units. Of those, we saw like 845 of them purchased. Wow. That is a 59% absorption rate.
Ooh, that's a lot.
Right. So if you relate that to, let's say, resale, we're at a 59% kind of sales to active listings ratio, which is well into seller's market.
Yeah.
Obviously. Well. And of course, when we're talking about records here, this is the highest since early 2018. Right, which echoes a lot of what we've been saying lately about the resale market with the highest HPI price ever, which just eclipsed 2018 as well.
Amazing. And I mean, that's it doesn't end there either. I mean, if you actually look back into February, go back a month prior, there were 9 projects released with 1,684 units came to market. And even that had an absorption rate of 45%, right? So still, that's a staggering number there, and growing clearly. Right.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's the thing to really pay attention to is just like resale, when we're seeing the pre-sale numbers accentuate at a very fast pace, I think it's a real indicator as to what's going to come in that type of asset.
Yeah. And the indicators are on both sides, right? Like if it's slow in resale, it's extra slow in pre-sale, right? And vice versa. I think COVID too, COVID really slowed down things for investors. Developers delayed their launches in many respects. They held back projects. And I almost feel like they held them back a little too long because when you're starting to see absorption rates at 59, 60%, they're kind of racing to catch up, if anything, right? And still, get a piece of this market. That's what it feels like. But, I also think, and I probably should have touched on this a little bit earlier, but the end user too is, I think they're aware of what's happening in the next 4 to 5 years in Canada in general, right? Like if you look at our immigration rates, which are going to be near 500,000 in that per year for the next sort of 4 to 5 years, Plus 2 million more people that are coming here, right? I mean, most of those people, I mean, those units are going to be ready at that kind of time frame, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the demand is going to be there for it as well. And then you've got exploding tech sector, right? You've got an increasing health and science sector here, right? And these are jobs that are being given to people from all around the world. And it's no surprise to me that they're looking at the long-term growth and see kind of what we're seeing and saying, well, I don't really need to risk my money. If interest rates decide to go up, I'm going to lock in a rate here for the next 4 years, and it'll be good for another 4 years.
Mm-hmm. You know
That's
what?
a good investment.
Yeah, it is. And I think there's something else at play that a few people might be considering when they're going into a pre-sale project right now. And that is the cost or price of construction, of building. Right? Because people are buying essentially at, let's call it today's prices, for a future value of 2 to 4 years out, right? For the build time. But what's happening right now as well, outside of just the cycles rather, that the real estate market goes through, is we're seeing an unprecedented increase in the cost to build these properties.
Oh my God, through the roof.
Right. One good example I think of this is one of our clients up in Squamish, right? He built that custom home and he pays very close attention to the cost to build properties because he's thinking about another one. Yeah. And, he was talking to his colleagues that are importing a lot of materials, and they literally said, and they came to the conclusion that this house that he built, what was that, 2 years ago?
2019.
Okay. So yeah, about probably finished it, a year ago or so.
Yep.
If he were to rebuild that home today, based on the material costs, he said his building costs would be double.
Yeah.
Just that.
I mean, the cost of timber alone has gone up threefold, right? So it now makes, the idea of buying a single family home or the redevelopment of a single family home much tougher to do because of the cost just to build it. I mean, I think down in the States, and the reason that this is happening is, we're selling a ton of our lumber to the States right now. I can't remember exactly when, I think it was 2018 or into 2017, there are 400,000 new building starts, right? There's 1.2 million right now that's happening in the States. They're going through a housing boom as well.
Yeah.
And, it's driven up the cost of materials because we're the biggest exporter of that kind of material, right? And so now even builders here are having trouble trying to get their hands on materials just to build the products.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? Think of that ratio. You literally have 3 times the amount of building applications in, and suddenly lumber costs 3 times as much. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, part of what weighs in there is, some people may be looking at this as, okay, I'm going to buy at today's price. The developer has their commitment, and of course they need to, complete this project. And if it costs them a bit more, well, by the time this thing completes, that means everything around it is going to be costing more as well.
Correct.
I guess a little bit on the flip side of that is the developers now have confidence in bringing their product to market because the demand is there. Right? They have a much higher likelihood or guarantee of being able to actually get their projects financed because they're going to hit that sales threshold that allow the lenders to give it the green light.
And I've gone through a number of different projects lately where I've seen developers actually pull their product off the shelf and come back the following week with a higher price, right? So we're starting to see where you could have got into a project, at a slower time for a much cheaper number. Those very same projects that haven't sold out are now going up in price, right? So something to think about as well. Make sure you check in with your developer if that's moved. If you had something, had your eye on something.
Yeah, I think a good example too is a project that just launched last week, or this week rather, up in Squamish. Right, there's a lot of interest in Squamish lately. Last like 5, 6, 7 years. We've got clients that just completed on a pre-sale that they bought back in 2017 and are extremely happy with the results and the returns that they're getting, both on the rental and the resale aspect. But to give you a bit of a boots on the ground of what's happening this week example, Redbridge in Squamish was released. The virtual kind of presentation to the realtors only drew 600 agents live. 600, maybe it doesn't sound like a huge number. There's only 93 units available.
Yeah.
That's phase 1, but there's only 93 units available. 600 agents watch this that have clients, I'll tell you myself, I've got 6 clients right now that want to buy into this one project. And I was just one of 600 agents. So you can imagine the demand that's going to be on a lot of projects in the upcoming and immediate future.
Well, and another thing for maybe, people who are just getting into the pre-sale sort of game and thinking about investing, when you see the big guys come into a place like Squamish, when you see the Bosas build in Squamish, when you see, big U.S. developers that are coming up to Squamish to build, uh, following construction, and the path of construction and those big developers, they pay analysts hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars every year to try and figure out where the next best place is to build, right? So following these guys is a very good way to learn about where the next hotspots are going to be. And clearly, when you've got 600 agents coming on for 93 units, and each agent minimum would have 1 to 2 possible buyers, I mean, the demand is through the roof. It's through the roof.
Yeah. Yeah. The developer for Redbridge, for example, is Kingswood. And they've got a number of towers in Vancouver and a whole bunch more coming up. And I think the most notable property that you've likely seen is, when you come over the Lionsgate Bridge into Vancouver, you go through Stanley Park, and just as you enter downtown, to the right by Stanley Park and the little lake that's right there, there's that building on the right-hand side, really cool, kind of that curved architecture.
Yep, I know. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's one of their buildings. So beautiful. This group is now up in Squamish.
Oh, it just goes to show you, right? I mean, I know Bosa's townhouse development there, I think, is a 9-phase project, right? Yeah. So they obviously believe in Squamish long-term as well. And that's, when you've got the Aquilinis that are up there thinking about building a mountain to compete with Whistler, right? Yeah. And then you've got other things in Squamish that are taking place. Like there's basically a mandate in Squamish right now to build townhouses, multifamily, basically densification mandate. And, single family homes, there's no new single family home developments. You can tear down an old one now and rebuild, but, places like Crumpet, up or in the Highlands where they were having expansion into those single family neighborhoods, they want townhome only, right? So the value of some of the elements in Squamish are rising as a result of 1, the interest, 2, the big developers that are there, and 3, the future phase planning. It's having an effect on all types of property.
That's it. It's just going to show that, especially in this environment, that demand will continue to outweigh supply. So people are going to get in almost wherever they can.
And Squamish is not subject to the foreign buyers tax, at least not yet.
Yeah, that's right. True. Give it a few days. 19th is just around the corner, but we'll see. Looking forward here as well. So, if you do have interest in pre-sale projects, our brokerage actually specializes in that, and we'd love to help you explore your options there. In the next couple months, it looks like there's going to be at least 9 new projects coming up. And this is everywhere from Squamish out to the Fraser Valley and everywhere in between. So there's going to be a good cross section of both your concrete high rise and your townhomes available. And of course, we've got our finger on the pulse for all of those. So if you are interested, please reach out to us, and we'd love to kind of have that conversation with you about what a pre-sale could do for you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that kind of wraps up our talk today on the pre-sale market and the things that are happening there. It's really good, if you're in the resale game, or you've just bought a resale as opposed to a pre-sale, don't fret. You're doing fine. At the end of the day, the pre-sale, like we said, is a lagging indicator. The fact that it's where it's at now just shows the strength of the resale market.
That's it. Thanks so much, Ryan. Thanks so much, everybody here, for watching and listening. For all of your real estate needs, pre-sale or otherwise, please visit thevancouverlife.com.